Good evening. Yeah. Adjust that camera, please. And this is the Love and Relationships podcast. And for the first time, we are on YouTube Live.
Yes, sir.
I think we should move the camera a little closer. Get a better shot. Yes, very, very nice. And we'd like to thank our studio audience for being here, and also all of our viewers and my co-hosts.
Morgan Morel. Hey, everybody. How y'all doing tonight?
That's what we're talking about tonight, Morgan.
So tonight we are talking about sustaining relationships when your partner is gone. We're going to explain, there's different, explanations of what gone could mean. It's going to range from physically having an illness and you mentally being gone. Partner is not the same person you got together with, right? Then there's going to be the actual gone of they're gone physically from this earth, and gone in the sense of formerly or incarcerated and are not physically present with the family. So that's what we're going to be discussing a little bit tonight.
And also, we're going to be discussing when people are gone in terms of incarceration.
Yeah.
Because when a man is incarcerated, he's away from his wife, his children. When a woman is incarcerated, she's away from her husband or boyfriend and children, and it's extremely traumatic on all ends, this separation. So basically, we're talking about how do you sustain a relationship when persons are simply no longer there. And we're going to start off by speaking about a topic that was inspired by the fact that B. Smith, who was a fashion icon, a fashion model, a restaurateur, a wonderful example of a Black woman who is accomplished and just did so much for so many people. She died last week. And B. Smith has gone through a horrendous ordeal over the last 6 or 7 years because she was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, which progressed to full-blown Alzheimer's. And her husband, Dan Gaspy, and her wrote a book called Before I Forget, which detailed their struggle. Now, the reason this is really in the news this week is because she died. But what happened, which really caused a lot of controversy, was her husband had a relationship with a woman.
Has a relationship still.
Yes, has still, yeah, because I imagine they're still together. He had a relationship with Alex Lerner, who was a white woman who came into his life while his wife was battling Alzheimer's, and he was very open about it. And he said that he and his wife had discussed this in advance, and this was what she wanted for him. Although I think that the reality is that probably this is what he wanted. Excuse me, but you're not going to go glass and ask the folks to move away from our window. We can actually hear them in our podcast. And it's extremely problematic for a husband who claims to be supporting his wife through this process to put his needs before hers. What do you think about this?
So I have a few opinions on this whole situation, just observations really. So I was listening to the interview that Dan Gaspy did with the Today Show. And on the Today Show, first I was just noticing like just different things that he spoke about, that, or at least things that were put into the interview, because the interview was probably much longer than what was actually seen in the video I watched. But from what I saw that the Today Show posted was specifically on, one, he had mentioned how his daughter had noticed something different about B. Smith back in 2008. And immediately when I heard that, I was just like, okay, if you notice something about your partner that you've been with for years and years and years, or you don't notice something, that was like the first red flag for me. So I'm like, wait a minute. First, she's like, the daughter said that, she saw something different, like you didn't see it. And then it was just, it's very hard to like take in this story, because at the end of the day, right now, B Smith, or, she can't speak for herself,
Yes.
and whatever she said, there is no guarantee that, she was really
It
meant
was
to.
what she said.
Yes. So I think the issue that at least that I felt like when I saw this interview was just that he made it seem as if like I understand the whole taking care of a sick spouse. My mom was actually sick. Yeah, my mom was sick for years, and my dad had to like step in that role. So I have like somewhat of experience, just like understanding, like seeing it firsthand, right? But at the same time, it's like, for a long time, my understanding of what marriage was, when you hear vows and they say in sickness and in health,
Till death do us part.
till death do us part. Yeah.
So how valid was that in this case?
Exactly. That's and I don't know. I think that one, if it is true that they both had a conversation before B Smith really got to this point, and they sat down and they literally laid out this, and they explained that this was what their relationship might become, that's different. But from the interview, it did not seem like that happened. Now, again, we are not in their relationship, so we don't know. But from my understanding, it just seems like it seemed like a decision that kind of happened after the fact of her being able to like voice her opinion on it, and especially given that the woman has literally been in the house like with them.
Yes.
There's like all these pictures of B Smith and the woman together, and it's just like, dang, like she really doesn't even know who she
It's
is.
almost like a menage a trois that is not actualized.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think there's a lot within that.
I think one of the things you have to look at is a matter of, well, there's several issues. One Facebook critic said, "You don't bring your mistress into your house while your wife is living. She's not dead yet."
Right.
So it's, at what point are you putting your needs ahead of a life situation?
And just respect.
Yes,
for your
and respect. If you have this agreement with your wife that your sexual needs are going to be taken care of by someone else, why can't that be elsewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Why would it have to be in a house where you and your wife built the memories and the life that she's famous for? And millions of people love B. Smith, and it was an insult to not only her and the memory of their marriage, but to the fans. Because your average fan just is not going to, understand that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that there's a racial connotation to it, because you have a white woman in the house while your black wife is battling a insidious disease. And it's just not a good look. Now, while saying that, let me also look at it from a man's point of view. All right. Yes, you are supporting your wife and you want the best for her, but Alzheimer's is a disease that robs a person of their personality. And they both realized that at some point in time, there was going to come a time when she would no longer know him as her husband and would no longer be able to fulfill his sexual needs. That'd be the last thing on her mind. But I think it should have been the last thing on his mind in that circle. If you're going to do that, it has to be somewhere far away from everything she knew, his daughter, their friends. I think everything has to be on social media and everything has to be commented on. In my mind, there are still some circumstances where the privacy and a family should come first.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think this ever should have been an issue that was public and could be fought about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would have to agree in that, when you're in a marriage, and mind you, I've never been married. So
I've been married.
I'm speaking from just like of what I perceive marriage to be, or what I've been taught about what marriage is, and not necessarily taught from, I've seen people do this, but just like what people, say what marriage is, in terms of what you should be looking for when you are trying to get married. And having the woman in the house, it just, I don't know. I think that you really have to stop and think about, okay, is this a part of your vows? I keep coming back to vows because, when I feel like when you vow to do something and be something for someone, but then, life circumstances happen, now the vows aren't credible anymore because something happened. But it's like, I thought that was the whole point of the vow, to, stick with whatever you say you're going to do despite whatever happens
Yes.
throughout the marriage. And it's like, people are like, oh, well, this happened and they made me feel this way and I did this. And so because they, did this or this happened to them. But it's like, okay, well, you're in a marriage. Didn't you sign up to deal with everything and anything with that person till death do you part, for sickness and in health? And it's like, so if that was not the intention, or even if it was the intention, how does that coincide with bringing another woman into the house and you know publicizing it? And just simply because her legacy was so big and vast, you would think that just to keep
The
keep
respect.
respect on her name, like
Yes.
that's, I just feel like that's just so disrespectful to her name and who she is. I don't know. That's my take on it.
And even if she agreed to the circumstances, I think that she likely would have agreed to it in the abstract, not in underneath her roof,
Right,
or
right.
not in that manner.
Right.
I think sometimes you just have to be old fashioned and say, this shit is not what's supposed to be.
Yeah.
You need to respect the marriage bond, and you need to keep your bullshit somewhere else, and you don't need to put it on social media, and you need to uphold the image of a woman whom someone loved for so many years. And B. Smith was really loved and respected by millions of people. I mean, she was an icon. She was called the Black Martha Stewart, and I think Martha Stewart should have been called the White B. Smith. I mean, that's reality. I mean, that's how vibrant she was. So,
And I'll say, like, even with the social media, posting on social media before she's even gone.
yes,
That's like, dang.
yes,
I mean, you're still married at the end of the day. Like, no matter what happens, making it so public before she's even gone, it's like, well, aren't you still married? Like,
and I wonder,
you're not separated. So why is it acceptable to, like, want a girlfriend when you're still publicly married? And I don't know. I think that if he, like, let's say he waited just a little longer and just waited until, like, she actually passed,
and then said this was the circumstances that we decided on, I think it might have been a little more palatable to some people, but I still think it would have been dead ass wrong.
Yeah.
One of my questions is Alex Lerner going to go to the funeral, and is she going to sit in the family pew?
So that's a good question. So on the interview, she was speaking on how she literally said that basically she thinks that it was like her and B. Smith were like friends or like sisters. No, she literally said the word sisters.
Sister wives.
Yeah, it's just that's literally what my friend said earlier.
That's some pimp shit.
And I said, "Oh, y'all are sisters. Well, that's interesting because B probably has no idea who you are." Yeah, and for you to be saying you're sisters, I just thought that was just so. Come on now. Like, even, okay, hypothetically, let's say that all of that is right and they did agree that they were going to be in, that he was going to have the freedom to date or whatever, if it got to that point. I just, it's just, listen, I know some things, anything is possible, but it's just very hard to believe that she would agree to, oh yeah, we can be friends too. Not only can you date, not only am I giving you permission to, like, date while I'm still here or not, but I can be friends with the woman. And I don't know. We all don't know what was really going on in that house, but it's just crazy to think about a woman being okay with being like, they were literally like hugged up, like smiling
Yeah.
together.
I've seen the pictures.
Yeah.
Folks need to go online, look at the pictures of B. Smith, Alex Lerner, and Dan Gaspy, and draw your own conclusion. And I will say this, for men who say, well, um, he can't be expected to go years and years without sex. As a man who spent 25 years incarcerated, let me tell you, you won't die from lack of sex. Yes, it's an imposition, and it's not something that you would willingly do. But if you really love somebody and they're in that situation, then maybe the absence of sex in your life is the sacrifice that you make to show how much you love someone.
Yeah.
I just don't think that having a
A desire of the flesh as a means to break wedding vows, or yeah, I would totally agree. I think that is a huge topic that we can like really pinpoint in the way of men um exerting as if it is impossible for a man to go years without sex.
and it's not impossible.
It's
a
really,
hardship, but it's not impossible.
right. But it's like just that idea, like
Priests do it all the time, don't they?
yes,
Some of
some
them. That's
but-
another topic for another show.
yeah, we don't need to get in that. But yeah, like I think that's very a issue that we should discuss of why is it that men are expected to they can't handle not having sex for a certain number of years.
And I'm wondering, I mean, let's just flip the circumstance and say that Dan was the one who was battling Alzheimer's and was in that situation. I truly doubt that B. Smith would have brought a white man any man into their relationship as her husband was failing. I think she would have supported him to the end, and it wouldn't even have been a situation or controversy.
And
I just think that.
it would also be some sort of expectation that the woman is supposed to refrain
Yes.
from sex
Yes.
because she's taking care of her husband. But then we have this notion that men don't, they shouldn't have to refrain from sex for all those years, but then women should. And just that is a tricky topic.
You know what James Brown said? What?
Um,
It's a man's world.
but it's not. I
It's
mean,
not.
it is. But
It's
it's,
not.
it's
Well,
not.
It is.
People
anyway.
think it is, but it's really
Yes.
not.
And many times the perception becomes reality.
Yeah.
So we're going to segue to our next situation. And for several weeks now, there has been an intense outpouring of sorrow and grief over the death of Kobe Bryant and his daughter Gianna, and the other 7 people who died in the unfortunate helicopter crash that took their lives. And just this past week, there was a public ceremony at the Forum, and it was an amazing display of the many people whose lives that Kobe had impacted. I think that it is one thing to be a basketball star that has fans and who is who gets adulation because of his uh, athleticism and his skill level. It's quite another to see an athlete or see a person who is adored because of the many good things they did, because of the way that he treated his family and his daughters and moved forward. And I think that the eulogy that his wife gave him and the outpouring of love from so many people really leads us into the question of what do you do when your partner is gone? And yes, this is Kobe Bryant, who is a celebrity and a superstar, and losing a beloved husband and child is perhaps one of the most tragic things that can happen. But there are times when people lose husbands, children, they lose their entire family. What do you do when a partner is lost in death? How do you sustain yourself? How do you honor their memory? What do you do to keep moving forward? And that's our next topic. Comments?
Yeah, so I would say to that. So, all right, I've dealt with the passing of my mom past this past April, almost a year. And I think for me, obviously it's a different type of relationship,
Yes.
but the way
But it's still death, and that's traumatic.
right, but the way in sustaining at least the relationship you had with the person, no matter what type of relationship it was, for me has truly come from remembering everything my mom taught me. As cliche as it sounds, I learned a lot from her. Um, and the good and the bad, just making sure I'm applying it and using it to better my life. And I think, Kobe's legacy that he left, that is, I mean, that's at this point, that is the only thing that people can do to truly sustain that relationship with him. Because, if you are literally doing the things that Kobe's, all these quotes that Kobe said of things, to persevere and, to be so tenacious and everything. That is how you truly like
And to
allow.
live life to the fullest and have a
Yes,
serious work ethic. He was known for his work ethic.
absolutely.
Nobody worked harder at their craft than Kobe.
Absolutely. And I would say that's as hard as it is, that is going to be like the main thing that you can do to maintain that relationship between the person and the deceased individual.
And let me say this: two of the favorite people in my life was my aunt Shirley and my uncle Lonnie. They had a love story that stretched about over 40 years. Um, Shirley came to live with us in the 1960s because, as black families, many times when you're from the South, your family comes up, stays with a family member, and they moved on. So she came to live with us for a couple of years, and then she moved on to New York. And as a young man, she was my conduit to a New York lifestyle. At 11, 12, 13, I'm spending the summer in Brooklyn. And then she met Lonnie, who was a wonderful husband. Well, first he was a wonderful boyfriend, which transformed into a um, husband and father. But he's one of the singular men in my life who I watched and I marveled at how he loved my Aunt Shirley. And they loved each other with a love and a devotion that was always amazing to me because you don't really see that. And she died about 4 years ago, and he died within a year of her passing. And I truly believe that he died of a broken heart because she was gone. And you just don't hardly see love like that anymore. You don't see. So I contrast that, with sometimes people have a inability to function when a person whom they love so much is gone. So if that's the case, how do you create a life for yourself when the center of your life is no longer there?
I would say so. I was listening to a video on YouTube the other day, and it was a part of my investment team. We have like these different videos sent out, these different calls that we get on that basically a lot of them have to do with life situations, but in terms of persevering towards your success. And one of the things that was discussed was the way pain creates purpose. Um, he literally used the analogy saying pain pushes the baby out, comparing it to pregnancy. When a woman is delivering a baby, she's creating a new life. She has to push the baby out, and it's very painful. And I think that, a lot of times when, people lose their spouse, it's like, how do I move on from this? How do I continue in a life without that person when they've been a part of my life for so long? And I really like this analogy that he used because it really speaks to what comes out of tragedy. When you go through something that's super painful, it literally is either going to break you or it's going to force you to push something out. Because there's a purpose behind everything that goes on in this world.
Yes.
There's a reason it happened. So if you are, taking the time to realize, okay, this is really painful. I feel for that family so much, because that, like John, I said, that is like one of the most tragic things, like the tragic feelings that you could feel so abruptly. But we don't want that pain to go to waste. We want to use that pain to create, because there's something better. There's
That energy,
something,
that spirit.
yes, there's something that's going to come out of all of this pain. We don't know what it is yet. I'm sure the family doesn't know what it is yet. They have to take some time to really grieve and just go through the pain, because I truly believe sooner or later, there's going to be something that comes from their death that is going to affect so many people, that it's going to make sense of, what, this might have happened because this needed to happen. We might not know what it is yet. It might take some years for it to come out into fruition, but it might not, just depending on how you take the pain and accept it and push it forward and push it out.
Yes, I definitely truly believe that. And this leads to a further discussion on because our topic for the evening is, what do you do when a loved one is gone? And death is an extreme example. Um, catastrophic illness is an extreme example, but these are everyday things that happen, and so we have to look at them as realities. And in this show, we're always going to deal with realities, because love and relationships and family and the community is joined. So one reality that we face, especially in the Black community, is the separation of husbands and wives, girlfriends, boyfriends, lovers, etc., and their families due to incarceration. And at present, 2.5 million people are incarcerated in the United States, and that's just in state and federal prison. That's not even talking about the hundreds of thousands who are in county lockup. And just in Pennsylvania alone, over 83,000 kids have a parent that's incarcerated. So our question for this segment is, what do you do? How do you sustain a relationship? How do you sustain a life? How do you treasure the memories of your loved person who was incarcerated?
So I'm going to ask you, John Dice, how did you do it? How did you manage doing that?
Well, I'm gonna say it was extremely difficult. As I said earlier, I spent 25 years of incarceration. One sentence, I did 7.5 years on a 16-year federal sentence. And then a little more than 3 years later, I was reincarcerated, because I was a unrepentant bank robber. I love robbing banks. I love that lifestyle. I was totally caught up in not only the materialism of what I was doing, but the defiance of society. But what I really hadn't grasped in my first sentence, because one of it was 7.5 years, which might seem like a long time, but that's a relatively short time when you're looking at jail time. The enormity of what would happen if I was reincarcerated and the laws had changed and I got a 20-year sentence and I was looking at 18 years straight. So when you're standing in front of a judge and he's just sentenced you to 20 years, and you got to do 80%, and that's 18 years straight, you are looking at your young children who are 8, 9, 4 or 5, and you're imagining that you're not going to see them again in freedom until they are graduated from high school and college and beyond. You're looking at your parents and realizing that they're going to grow old while you're gone. You're looking at your community and you are imagining that all these things that you treasured is now going to be lost to you for many, many years. And that's a daunting task. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it and, act like it wasn't difficult. It was extremely difficult. In times it was excruciating. But as with everything, you sacrifice and you work and you persevere so that you can maintain relationships. Now, it's extremely difficult to maintain romantic relationships when you're incarcerated. My wife and I at the time, when I got incarcerated, you know, The first bit, she didn't last the whole bit. The second time I was incarcerated, I was in a relationship, but I was smart enough to know from my first incarceration to let this go. And once I was incarcerated and the prospect of being down that long, I told her it was time for her to move on with her life. And then while you're incarcerated, it is possible to form relationships, but rarely do they last more than 2, 3 years of the shot because it's extremely difficult to sustain a relationship where there is no physical intimacy. And we just had a show on intimacy last week about how important it is. But I think that the relationships on a romantic side that you cultivate and you engage in while you're incarcerated are in some ways, I'm not going to say superior, because very few things trump physical intimacy. But the level of spiritual, mental, and um, emotional intimacy that you experience with a person when you are communicating and you fall in love and you are struggling together through incarceration is like, it's on a whole nother level. I mean, it's really very difficult to explain except for folks who go through it. I think many times you see stories of women who marry prisoners or even men who go to jails and they marry female prisoners, although that's much less. I will say that women, if you go to any prison visiting room in the country, whether it's state, county, or federal, you're going to see more women in the visiting room visiting than any other thing. And that's in a male prison or in a female prison. Women are the nurturers. They are the repository of love and emotion and family feeling, far more difficult than men. I mean, it's not even to be, argued. If anybody argues with me, trust me, you don't know what you're talking about. So I think that the maintaining of a relationship when a person is incarcerated really seems to fall more into the female realm. Men just don't do it well. They just don't. I mean, I don't know if that's a mental failing we have, or it goes back to the Dan Gatsby, B. Smith thing. Like, what are you thinking about? If you're with a woman, and so many times, especially now, women are being incarcerated at higher rates because they're involved in relationships with men who are doing criminal activity. That's the largest, unless a woman is an active drug user and there's a reason that she's, doing crime to feed a habit. Most women are not going to rob banks. They're not going to do strong arm robberies. They're not going to be a part of a drug operation unless they're involved with some guy who is saying, this is our lifestyle, this is how we're going to live. And it used to be, before the federal RICO laws, the organized crime laws, that many times a woman who's in a relationship with a guy who is actively involved in crime wouldn't be prosecuted. Now, federal and state authorities are saying if you're profiting from the proceeds of an operation, if you help your husband, if you drive him places, if you bag up for him, if you in any way are involved in it, then you are a co-conspirator and you're going to do that time. And that's why so many women are caught up. I think it's extremely difficult to maintain those relationships, and you really have to do superhuman things, to keep a relationship alive, not just with romantically. When you talk about relationships and incarceration, you're more talking about families. The romantic side between a man and a woman is just a small part of it. Because now a daughter doesn't have a father, a son doesn't have a father, or neither child has their mother. And it's trauma. And so often grandmothers, a lot of times your grandfather ain't there, just like fathers aren't there. and it's women holding the families together.
Mhm.
So you have a whole generation of grandmothers who are raising a second generation of children when they should be perhaps,
Living their life.
yes, yes, most definitely living a life.
Mhm. Yeah. So, what would you say to this kind of stigma around, when a man goes to prison, the woman is supposed to hold him down while he's there. Meanwhile, if it's like tables are turned and the woman is in prison, it's almost,
You fucking everything moving.
yeah, like
Let's be real.
it's
You know,
it's not even a
maybe even a
question.
cousin or a sister, something scandalous.
You never know. But yeah, it's like this imbalance between what is expected of a woman when the partner is incarcerated versus what's expected of a man, or if there's anything expected of a man. Because after, the one woman is gone, it's like, well, the man has sexual needs, so all of that goes out
It's
the
on to the
window.
next.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And,
Yeah.
Quick question: would you let it? And would you think that's acceptable if someone's incarcerated for the partner to have another relationship?
So we have a question from our studio audience. Do you think it's acceptable for a person to have a sexual relationship when their partner is incarcerated? As I can only use my own experience and the experience of the men who I did time with, those who are my friends, who I loved as my brothers, and I can look at what happened in their lives because their lives were our lives. Because understand when you're incarcerated and you develop friendships, over the years, you become a family, and you cultivate a family inside the walls that doesn't replace your outside family, but it sustains you day to day because you're not seeing your wife, you're not seeing your kids or your mother or your father or your aunts or uncles or your extended family. So you form family groups inside of the prison to move forward. So I say that to say this. First, in my own case, when I was first incarcerated and I was in my 20s and my wife, we were both in our 20s, I told her that I'm going to be going for at least 5 years. I don't expect you to not have sex for 5 years because I had a 16-year sentence. My minimum was 5. I ended up doing 7.5. But I said, be discreet. The clubs. Situations. If you want to go out on the weekend and, meet somebody and have a physical relationship, I don't have a problem with that because I'm gone and I cannot sustain your needs over that period of time. All I ask you is don't do it around my kids and respect me as a person. Respect my name and respect what I did and who I am. Because you always have elevated, view of yourself.
Mhm.
And for the first
Sure.
couple of years, she did that. But then she started a relationship with a young boy who was some trash, and who I felt, you're doing him. Like that totally disrespects me. I mean, you're living in my hometown, balling somebody who I wouldn't even, he's a young boy, I wouldn't even, listen, that broke us up because I feel
Because
like,
of the choice of person.
yes, choice of person. I'm not saying, you can't ride no more. That's what, people do, because that's the reality of sexual relations. And smart guys understand that. And I did time with so many guys who allowed their girlfriends wife. I can't even say allowed. They made that stipulation that that's what you need to do because you are a sexual being and you have that needs. And here's another reality. When you are in that gangster life and you stacking paper and you're doing what you do, what do you attract? Many times the finest women, and you shower them with material things and you accustom them to a life of gratification. And then when you're gone, all of a sudden that stops. And then you want that 10, who that's what you wanted. You wanted the 10, and you condition her to a lifestyle. Now you want her to be a nun or a school teacher or some shit that she never was in the first place. So be real. You know, look at what it is. But I also say that there was one guy in particular who I met in USB Atlanta. He had been down 28 years, and he and his wife had a similar relationship, but she was extremely discreet, and he never heard anything. I mean, I don't know what she did when she did it, but there was no whisper in his hometown and his family. I mean, she was like totally discreet, and no matter where he was in the Fed system, she came to visit him. She supported him. To me, they had a real love that transcended the fact that she had a physical relationship with someone else. You know, and that's what smart people do. Now, what happens for many couples is the wife tries to hang in there for a long time, and when she finally can't anymore and transgresses in his eyes, then she's a slut, she's a bitch, she's all this, and there's a violent breakup, and it's traumatic for the entire family. We used to teach young boys that you have to look at the reality of relationships, and that's hard to say. We used to also say, you know, yes, you're upset because you know your wife or your girlfriend is now with somebody else, and you know she got another baby, and now your son or daughter, and that new son or daughter is now sisters and brothers. But the reality is, he taking care of all of them, and you ain't there. So the reality is, you kind of owe him. I mean, that's not a popular point of view, and young boys used to snap when I would say something like that. You know, but this is reality. You know, you ain't making no money. You ain't paying no bills. You know, you ain't doing shit except sending letters talking about the commissary day is coming. You know, this dude is not only raising your kids, paying them bills, but he probably breaking off a little money for you to go to commissary. Yo, you got to look at the reality.
So, what do you think it will take for men to? Because I feel like it's a maturity level of being able to self-reflect on your part in everything that's happened, and being mature enough, and I guess loving enough to, you know, give your partner that blessing to, you know, still live their life, but still remember what you all have.
So let's go back to the very beginning of our conversation. If B. Smith gave that blessing to her husband to have a physical relationship, that was an act of sacrificial love.
Yeah.
My mother right now is going through first stages of Alzheimer's, and I can tell you that's traumatic to children. You know, my mother, Mildred Harrell Blackman, because she got married again, and she always said Blackman, but to me she always be Mildred Harrell. Hated her second husband, but she was one of the smartest. No, not one of. She was the smartest woman in our family, and she had 6 sisters and a brother, and by far, growing up, like in every generation, there's one person the whole family revolves around. You know what I mean? Like family dinners, planning. I mean, you just gravitate to that person. In my mother's generation, it was her. In my generation, is my sister Linda. In the next generation, my children, is my daughter Rashika. They are the people whose, you know, family celebrations are at. I mean, they're the catalyst of the family. So to watch her as a mother deteriorate, and when I visit her, invariably from there for a week or a weekend, there's a point in time when I walk into a room or she looks at me and says, "Who are you?" I mean, at that point in time, she has no sense of who I am. And I have to gently, you know, walk her back until it clicks that I'm her son, and then she's back to normal, you know. But that's traumatic. So imagine what that is to a husband who has loved a wife to such a point that this is his whole life, and now she has no knowledge of who he is. So that's a sacrifice. So to me, when you talk about husbands and wives, and you talk about lives, you're talking about sacrifice. For Vanessa Bryant, you know, likely she will be sacrificing for many years to come, because who can follow Kobe? Who can be a father like he was to their daughters, and who can be a legacy like he was to her, who met him when she was 17 and he totally transformed her life.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry to say, what will be the backlash if in 3 or 4 years she meets somebody and she wants to have a life?
That would be that would be huge. That would be, and I think in a similar way of Vanessa and Kobe with Nipsey and Lauren London. I think that would be like a huge. Don't let the woman they're with end up, being with another man, even if it's years after, just because of the legacy that they left. It's like you need to respect that legacy, right?
How can you disrespect Nipsey? How can you disrespect Kobe?
And although Kobe, Nipsey, and B. Smith are all on different levels, they're still they're icons. They're highly respectable people in this society. So it's like, how can one be okay and the other not be okay?
It's going to be very difficult.
Yeah.
So bringing that back to the incarceration angle, it's all about respect, love, sacrifice, and what you will do to create memories and to create a lasting legacy for your family. When you're incarcerated, there are so many directions you can go in, and those who are really intuitive and who can say, well, one thing you get a chance to do when you are incarcerated is reflect and look back on your life. And if you do it in a clear-eyed fashion, then you have to say, this shit did not work. I'm behind bars. My kids are growing up by themselves. My wife or my girlfriend or my husband is without me. How can I change myself so this will never happen again? So that amount of self-reflection leads to a self-sacrifice where you begin to try to change your life and to do things so that when you get a chance at freedom again, you can become a better person. Mm-hmm. So many times that ordeal creates a transformation that is uplifting for you in perhaps in a different way, but a similar situation when someone that you love dies, and now you have to craft a life without them, and you find yourself doing many things you may never thought you would have to do, but it's what's necessary to sustain a family. So I really believe that the basis of love and relationships is how much you are willing to give of yourself that is not for yourself. And unless people really come into relationships with that mind frame, then it's going to be different. Because how many times have you heard, like you're younger, so how many times have you heard your girlfriends, talk in terms of different phases of relationships? Not so much what, a guy can buy for them or do for them or to be with them, but dreaming of having a full life for many years with somebody and putting in the time and energy necessary to create a future. I think we've gotten out of the habit of looking at a family as a system or a unit that we need to sustain, and that's essential to our growth as African people. Our culture has always been the community first, and then the family, and then the individual. But being here in America, in a culture that is Eurocentric and self-centered, now our focus has become what is good for the individual, and secondary, maybe someone you love or your family, and definitely last the community. Because when you think of the things that people do to each other, they can't have that family feeling if they are, doing crazy things.
I think that also ties into literally our first episode's topic of self-love. And how, because all the things you're saying in terms of like self-reflection, so there's like a level of self-love that is required in order to really be able to self-reflect, to stop and like think about, okay, who am I and what am I doing and how is it affecting other people? You have to be somewhat in tune with yourself to know yourself, to be able to reflect, okay, what am I doing and how are my actions affecting the people around me? How will it affect, in the future to come? So I think that is like a major piece that like a lot of times is not discussed in terms of, for example, you being incarcerated, you taking the time to figure out what's best for you. Because a part of self-reflecting is just knowing what's best for you, loving yourself, knowing, okay, you know what? In order for me to become my best self, I need to stop and I need to think about what I've been doing so I can be better. So I can be better for not only for myself, but for my family, for my community, and so on and so forth. But I think that level of self-reflection is like so lost because one, nobody wants to ever get quiet and just think about stuff.
Yes.
Everybody's always just trying to be distracted. We have so much social media. We have like our phones at our disposal at every second of the day. So it's like we never have to sit and think about anything if we really don't want to, because there's always a distraction that can take our attention.
Fill that time up.
Yes. So it's like if you don't take that time and just get still, think about your life. I listened to this podcast called The Mindset Mentor, and the guy literally always talks about what's wrong with society is that we don't take the time to just be still. We're always trying to do something. And he literally discussed how he's done this thing where like he goes to some like workshop place where you literally go and you're quiet for like 10 days straight and you don't have any sort of distraction. You don't have, yes, you literally just
That's
like,
serious.
you just meditate like and just be quiet and still the entire time by yourself. And people would be like, oh no, I'm not doing that. I'll go crazy.
But you can, and you don't go crazy.
Yeah, but it's like, well, why do you think you're going to go crazy? Because you're going to be alone with your thoughts? Are your thoughts that bad that you can't be alone with them? And if they are that bad, well, you need to think some more because you got to get to a point.
Used to being alone, though.
Yeah. Nobody wants to be alone. That's the thing. Nobody wants to be alone ever. And there's such a bad stigma with being alone, especially being a woman.
You never got to be alone.
Right.
Because your phone is your
right.
your companion to the world.
Yeah.
It's crazy. A lot of folks know from this podcast that I'm a Rastafarian Quaker. And often folks ask me, well, how is that compatible? But one of the things that I really love about being a Quaker is our religious service is not with a minister or anyone saying anything. It's an hour of meditation, and sometimes during that meditation, the Spirit will move somebody to stand up and speak, and they will. But mostly it's called silent worship, and what that means is I know that at least 1 hour a week, if I attend that meeting, I'm going to be a self-reflective. I'm going to be meditative. I'm going to be focused inward and not outward. All phones are off. There's no outside world. It's just you and your thoughts and your meditation. And that's very powerful. And I think that more times in our life, we need to take some time for ourselves and be by ourselves and just look inward.
Mm-hmm.
And in this, as you said, in this world, we just don't do that enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just to tie it all together, given in Vanessa's case and her loss and her huge loss, although it's probably going to be really hard, eventually she's going to have to get to a place where she's going to have to just self-reflect on, who is she without Kobe? How can she move forward? What can she bring to the world in light of all of this? And that's going to take some heavy, deep self-reflection. It might, take
some work.
Yeah, it's going to take time. But doing that rather than suppressing the underlying issues, for example, like hypothetically, she wouldn't, but if she were to just hop into another relationship, she wouldn't even take the time to self-reflect and like really think about who am I as an individual without that person? and what can I bring from this situation? Because as soon, you know, if you were to hop into another relationship, you don't even have the time to like have that thought process. So your mind is immediately on something else. So then you don't really heal from the situation because you've rushed into something else instead of taking the time to really think through everything.
And also another aspect, I feel extremely sorry for any man who would try to be next. I mean, you know, especially if it were an athlete, you know, another basketball player, he's going to get disrespected and dogged in the world of social media like you've never seen before.
Yeah.
I mean, even if his intentions were honorable, you know, that's that whole situation is going to be extremely traumatic all the way around. And I'm also interested, you know, because we had this discussion, to see what's next in the life of Dan Gaspy and Alex Lerner. You know, are they going to be a couple now, or, you know, I mean, like, what is next for them in lieu of all the drama that has transpired with, you know, B. Smith and her disease? All right, now you're a free person. You know, now your wife is gone. What's next for you in your life?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm going to be interested to. I mean, I'm not going to stalk them, but I'm definitely going to, you know, keep an eye on, you know, on that situation, just to, you know, out of personal interest.
Yeah.
And on our last aspect, this is the um, TCRC Community Healing Center, and for folks who have been incarcerated, for children who have incarcerated parents, for wives whose husbands or boyfriends or lovers are incarcerated, this is the place you can come, and we understand your situation, and we can. We have counseling sessions, we have groups, and we can also refer you to whatever you need that can help you to heal. I think that the trauma, you know, there is trauma involved with mass incarceration, the family trauma, individual trauma, but there's also just trauma being black in America. You know, trauma being black. You know, living in Philly. You know, the trauma in our daily lives. And this is a center where we invite you in. We help people to deal with their realities. So we definitely want to um, hype the fact that we're at 3609 North Broad Street, and this is the home of the Love and Relationship podcast. And we really thank you for taking time out of your Wednesday evening to listen to us, you know, as we discuss things that we really feel are important. I'm going to be here every Wednesday at 9 p.m. on, I'm sorry, at 8 p.m., 8 to 9 p.m. on two platforms, YouTube Live and also our Facebook Love and Relationship, where we really like for you to tune into the YouTube Live, because that's going to be our vehicle to really reach as many people as possible. Any last words, Maureen?
No, I think you've covered it. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And comment below. Comments what any type of opinions you may have on the situation. Anything that you've taken from any of these losses, or you know anything that is personal to your life and you want to share.
And especially on YouTube, Morgan and I will look at the comments and we'll respond. You know, don't think that this is just a one-way conversation. And as time goes by and we acquire more support in terms of technology and material, we're going to have a section where we can open it up to live to questions on the air, and we really look forward to it. In the meantime, as always, in closing, we say peace, love, and respect, and take care of those whom you love. Respect your relationships, and you can find love if you search for it. Peace. You gotta move that little caption.